New evidence, new voices, and a nurse's confession that shocked the internet. Nearly 3 decades after Tupac's death, a hospital insider claims to have witnessed his final moments, and what she says might change everything you thought you knew about Tupac. A nurse's confession comes to light. They said the night of September 7th, 1996 was supposed to be nothing but celebration. Vegas was lit. Mike Tyson had just dropped Bruce Seldon in one round at the MGM Grand, and every corner of the strip was booming with limos, silk suits, and that death row energy. But that energy flipped quick. By 11:15 p.m., gunfire would slice through the desert night. And within 6 days, the voice of Tupac Amaru Shakur, a man who rapped about thug life and revolution in the same breath, would fall completely silent. And now, nearly 3 decades later, claims that a nurse who was there at the hospital finally spoke out, revealing Tupac's last words before he died. But before we even get there, let's walk back into that night. The chaos, the blood, the fear, the real story that too many people got twisted. It was 11:10 p.m. when the black BMW 750IL glided through East Flamingo Road. Tupac was in the passenger seat, Mary and Suge Knight behind the wheel, the two kings of death row records moving through Vegas like generals. They had just handled an altercation inside the MGM, a beatdown that went down on Crip affiliate Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, a Southside Compton soldier. Minutes later, at that intersection of East Flamingo and Koval Lane, a white Cadillac rolled up beside them. And in that one frozen second, history got rewritten in bullets. 4 shots tore through the BMW, 2 in the chest, 1 in the thigh, 1 grazing his hand. Shattered glass, burning rubber, Suge ducking, trying to control the car as sirens screamed in the distance. Police would later say Suge was grazed by shrapnel but kept driving through the chaos until they were stopped on Las Vegas Boulevard by flashing blue lights. Paramedics rushed Tupac to University Medical Center, the trauma center where he'd fight for his life for the next 6 days. When they wheeled him in, he had massive internal bleeding. 1 bullet had collapsed his right lung. He was rushed straight into emergency surgery. Doctors had to remove his right lung just to stop the bleeding. From there, they placed him on life support, inducing a medical coma using barbiturates, a last-ditch effort to reduce brain swelling and stabilize him. And for the first night, he did stabilize, but barely. The doctors worked like machines. Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, had just arrived, standing tall but breaking inside. His fiancée, Kidada Jones, Quincy Jones's daughter, was also there. She sat in that cold waiting room while the monitors beeped, hoping for something, anything, to change. Over the next few days, September 8 through 12, the hospital staff fought to keep him alive. His condition would stabilize, then crash again. Doctors had to resuscitate him multiple times, as many as 7, according to Afeni herself. His body was swollen from the IV fluids, and the machines were all that kept his heart beating. Even then, the world outside UMC kept spinning in confusion, gang tensions on one side, conspiracy rumors on the other. On September 11th, the chaos reached a different kind of low. A photographer disguised as a nurse managed to sneak into Tupac's room and snap pictures of him hooked up to tubes and machines. Those leaked images became the only known hospital photos of Tupac ever released, and they spread across tabloids like wildfire. That invasion of privacy, it just showed how the world saw him, not as a patient, not as someone's son, but as a spectacle. 2 days later, September 13th, 1996, at 4:03 p.m., the machines were finally turned off. Afeni made the call herself. The revival attempts had failed too many times. She told the doctors to let her son go, that he'd fought long enough. Tupac passed peacefully, surrounded by family. He was just 25 years old. And yet, even with his mother's statement, the autopsy, the death certificate, people still couldn't accept it. Because Tupac wasn't just a man, he was myth in motion. It's October 2025, and out of nowhere, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube all start buzzing about a so-called nurse who supposedly broke her silence about Tupac's final words. One viral post read something like, "I was there when Tupac took his last breath. I fainted when I saw him. A voice told me, let him go." But here's the truth. That nurse doesn't exist. Fact checkers traced the videos to anonymous accounts posting from random Facebook groups and TikTok reels. One fake profile even used the name Carla Evans, a made-up nurse who supposedly worked at UMC. No records, no licensing, no interviews, nothing. The story didn't come from CNN, didn't come from Las Vegas. Review Journal didn't even come from any of the doctors who were actually there in '96. And yet, people ate it up. Why? Because Tupac's death has always been more legend than event. We've seen him die in headlines, but we never really saw him gone. So when the internet whispers maybe he spoke before he passed, people listen, because it's easier to believe in resurrection than in loss. Now, to be clear, there is one confirmed account of what Tupac said after being shot. It didn't come from a nurse. It came from Sergeant Chris Carroll, the LVMPD officer who held him on the street. And Carroll's story hasn't changed in nearly a decade. He said when he asked Tupac, "Who did this?" Pac looked at him one last time, blood in his mouth, defiance in his stare, and said, "Fuck you." Then he lost consciousness and never spoke again. Carroll said he respected respected it, that even in death, Pac refused to break code. That's the thug life tattoo on his stomach, speaking for him in the end. So when those 2025 nurse revelations hit the feed, all that was really happening was the internet remixing a myth that had already been written in blood back in '96. As news of his death hit the airwaves, the world stood still. MTV went black and white. The radio played Changes and Keep Your Head Up on loop. And in every hood from LA to Baltimore, somebody lit a candle for him on the block. Back in Vegas, the cops scrambled for leads, all eyes on the white Cadillac that vanished into the night. That same Cadillac would later tie into the confessions of Dwayne Keffy D. Davis, who in his own words admitted being in that car when Tupac was shot.
Keffy D turns around to hand the gun to the back seat. Orlando Anderson, who's in the right rear passenger, reaches forward and says, "Give me that motherfucker," leans over DeAndre Smith out the back window of the Cadillac and begins shooting rapidly into the BMW.
The confession matched with witness accounts, ballistics, and police findings from that night, down to the gun type, a .40 caliber Glock, exactly what detectives had been looking for since 1996. But this story ain't done yet, because the truth behind that drive-by, the revenge, the retaliation, and the setup goes way deeper than what happened at that red light. Up next, we'll step into the streets, into the gang war that lit this whole fuse, and into the confessions that would finally lead police to reopen the case almost 30 years later, including the exact words from Keffy D himself, as he describes that night. From the beef to the bullets. The retaliation theory, blood for blood. They say what goes around comes around, but in Compton, it don't just come around, it spins the block. After Tupac was gunned down in Vegas, every rumor, every whisper pointed to one thing: retaliation. Because what happened at that MGM lobby wasn't just a random scuffle, it was a violation. Earlier that night, around 9 p.m., right after the Mike Tyson fight, security cameras caught Tupac, Suge Knight, and their crew stomping out a man in the MGM lobby. That man was Orlando "Baby Lane" Anderson, a known Southside Compton Crip. This wasn't some rap beef, this was Bloods versus Crips, and Pac, rolling with Suge's death row entourage, had publicly humiliated a Crip soldier on camera. And out in the streets, that's a death sentence. By the time Pac and Suge hit the strip, word was already moving through Vegas that Southside Crips wanted payback. That same night, a few cars full of Crip affiliates were already spinning the area around Club 662, where Tupac was supposed to perform later. This wasn't planned weeks ahead, it was impulsive, street justice. And the man orchestrating it all, sitting cool in the front passenger seat of that white Cadillac, was none other than Dwayne Keffy D. Davis. When Keffy D. later spoke in his taped confession and interviews, he painted the whole night like a movie gone wrong. It started with anger, then opportunity, then chaos.
Zip offers Keffy D the .40 caliber Glock that he has stashed in his Mercedes out in the parking lot. Backing up Keffy's story, we had a cooperating witness who was present at the MGM that night after Orlando Anderson was beat down. He testifies to the fact that he sees Orlando Anderson bleeding from the head, and he sees the group get together to start to plan the retaliation.
According to Keffy D, that moment was the spark. His homie Zip reminded him of a standing offer, a bounty supposedly put out by Sean Diddy Combs long ago, connected to that East Coast-West Coast war. Whether that bounty was real or not, Zip told him, "This your perfect opportunity." And Keffy, he took it. They left the MGM and got 2 cars, a white Cadillac and a van full of shooters. Their plan was simple: catch Pac before he hit Club 662, end it right there in Vegas. But the thing is, Pac never made it to that club. He stopped at a red light, and fate stopped with him. Those bullets, 4 in total, came from the right side of that Cadillac. The shooter, Orlando Anderson himself. The motive, retaliation for the beating he took hours earlier. The code, handle it before they handle us. That's how street wars go. No contracts, no signatures, just word, pride, and the heat of the moment. Most people think the story ends right there, with Tupac bleeding out on Flamingo Road. But Greg Kading, former LAPD detective and lead investigator into the Tupac and Biggie murders, revealed another twist.
Very few people know that immediately after Tupac is shot and that white Cadillac is fleeing, one of the death row entourage, a guy named Alton McDonald, known as Buntree, chases after the Cadillac, and a second shooting takes place.
That means Suge Knight's own right-hand man shot back. So whatever the internet says about Suge setting Pac up, that doesn't line up, because why would his main enforcer chase and shoot at the killers if he was part of it? Even the Las Vegas Police Department's internal report confirmed Buntree's car was struck by bullets that night, but those details never made the front page. They got lost between myths, headlines, and Suge's reputation. Now here's where things get deep, because you might ask, if they knew who did it, why did it take decades to arrest somebody? That's because for years nobody talked. Street code, fear. And truth be told, the cops didn't care much about solving a rapper's murder in 1996. It wasn't until Keffe D started talking years later that things cracked open again. Back in 2008, he sat down with LAPD under a proffer agreement, basically immunity for telling the truth, and started laying it all out. But the thing is, Keffe wasn't confessing out of guilt. He was flexing. He was boasting about what he did and who was there. He even wrote it all down later in his 2019 memoir, Compton Street Legend. By 2023, police had enough to move. Keffe D was arrested on September 29, 2023, charged with first-degree murder with a deadly weapon, based on his own words. And when detectives opened the case files, they found the trail led all the way back to the same motive that night: revenge for Orlando Anderson's beatdown at MGM. For years, that MGM footage sat in evidence lockers, but once it resurfaced, it connected dots no one could deny. There's Tupac, decked out in a Versace shirt, sneakers squeaking on the marble floor, swinging first. Suge's crew joins in, stomping Anderson out as casino security scrambles. The tape ends, but the streets kept rolling. That tape wasn't just evidence, it was the spark that justified the drive-by retaliation in the eyes of the Southside Crips. One video, one night, one decision, and it led straight to Vegas gunfire. But Keffe D's story didn't stop with the confession tape. He kept doing interviews, some public, some coded, even after the immunity deal expired. That's what got him caught up again. In one interview with Vlad TV, Keffe said something that showed how loose he'd gotten.
Why they keep asking this crooked ass cop shit, man? Just like I said, when he said, "Bet you Keffe D getting locked up for Tupac murder?" And I said, he need to be right in handcuffs with me for Biggie murder, because I know he had his hands in that shit.
He was talking about Reggie Wright Jr., a former death row security officer who Keffe accused of being tied up in both Tupac and Biggie's cases. It was bold talk, and dangerous too. Keffe claimed he had made a deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office, which protected him back in 2008. But that LAPD detective Greg Kading broke that trust when he recorded him.
You don't think that shit's crooked as a mother? We can get people killed behind that shit.
Released
To street folks, that was the sound of a man trying to rewrite his past. To prosecutors, it was self-incrimination on camera. To understand why Pac's death shook the world, you gotta understand the war it came from. In the mid-90s, Death Row Records repped the West, and Bad Boy Records, led by Sean Diddy Combs and the notorious Big, repped the East. It wasn't just about music, it was territory, respect, and retaliation. Pac had just gotten out of prison, signed to Death Row, and was taking shots at Biggie and Puff on tracks like Hit 'Em Up. And that energy wasn't just on wax, it was in the streets. People got jumped, studios got shot up, the tension was gasoline, and Vegas was the match. So when the internet now drags Diddy into every new theory, it's not random, it's recycled, born from old whispers and half-truths. In his taped confession, Keffe hinted that Diddy once offered money to take out both Pac and Suge, but that claim's never been proven. Even so, it's that same old story that keeps people talking. Because in hip-hop, truth and myth live on the same block. What's wild is, after all these years, people still debate whether Keffe D told the truth. Some say he snitched on himself for fame. Others think he finally just got tired of carrying it. But even after his arrest in 2023, he still downplayed it, telling ABC News in early 2025 that he was actually in LA that night, not Vegas. Now that might sound crazy, but it's also classic damage control. He said his memoir was embellished, that his co-writer made it sound worse than it was. But prosecutors didn't buy that, because when you got a man on tape describing who held the gun, who drove the car, and what lane they were in, that's not something you can just edit away. And the feds had more. They had corroborating witnesses, cell records, and the same pattern of statements from 2008, 2010, and 2018, all leading back to Keffe and Orlando Anderson being right there that night. As of April 2025, Keffe D's trial had already been delayed multiple times. First from June 2024, then to November, then March, and now all the way to February 2026, pending new witness testimony. That's almost 30 years after Pac's death. And that testimony, rumor is, it could flip the whole case. Some say it might prove Keffe wasn't in Vegas, others say it might finally bring in more names that tie deeper into the industry side. Meanwhile, Tupac's family, led by his stepbrother Mopreme Shakur, hired lawyer Alex Spiro to investigate alleged ties between Diddy and the 1996 hit, though no charges have ever been filed. And Diddy, he's been denying every allegation since 2008, calling it all fiction. It's wild. One man's confession triggered a murder trial and reopened a generation's worth of suspicion. Back in that Vlad TV interview, when they asked Keffe D if he was afraid of going to prison again, his answer was cold.
If they want to come put me in jail for life, it's just something I got to do, dude. You know what I'm saying? And like I'm scared of jail or nothing.
That's how you know he's from that cloth. He'd rather go down with the story than admit he lied. And that's exactly what makes his confession so haunting. Because whether he's telling the truth or not, he believes it's his truth. Nearly 30 years later, the story of Tupac's death still sits in limbo between courtroom evidence and street legend. Each time the system moves an inch, the internet spins it a mile. But the truth, the real truth, is that this was never just about a rapper getting shot. It was about respect, about a man who carried his block, his message, and his pain on his back. It was about what happens when ego meets destiny. In the next part, we dive into the bigger machine behind Tupac's death, how law enforcement, record labels, and rivalries shaped this saga from the inside out. We'll unpack why investigators once looked at Diddy, how Reggie Wright Jr. ended up in the narrative, and why justice in hip-hop often moves slower than beats in a mixtape. Crooked Badges and Pac's legacy. By now, the story had stretched from the streets of Compton to the corridors of the LAPD. What started as a gang feud had grown into a full-blown federal question. How did one of the biggest murders in music history, one with cameras, witnesses, and names, go unsolved for nearly 3 decades? To find that answer, you gotta look beyond Vegas. You gotta look into the system itself, where cops turned businessmen, where informants became ghosts, and where money talked louder than justice. After Tupac's death, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, LVMPD, handled the case. But handled might be the wrong word, because in truth, they didn't handle much. Vegas police treated the shooting like a bar fight gone bad. No crime scene perimeter was maintained for long. Witnesses, including Suge Knight and death row entourage members, either refused to talk or vanished within 48 hours. Even the car, the white Cadillac, disappeared into thin air. And with Suge and Pac's reputation for chaos, police had little motivation to chase every lead. To them, this was just another case of gang members killing gang members. It was easier that way. File it under retaliation and move on. But what the cops didn't realize was that this case would eventually expose more than just a shooting. It would uncover the cracks in both law enforcement and the music industry. The same cracks Tupac himself warned about in songs like Trapped and Only God Can Judge Me. When retired LAPD detective Greg Kading reopened the case years later, he didn't just find names, he found patterns. He discovered that both Tupac's and Biggie's murders shared one common denominator: corrupt law enforcement figures tied to death row records. Kading's findings suggested that some off-duty LAPD officers, including Reggie Wright Jr., were working security for Suge Knight's label while still carrying badges. That was already against policy, but what came next was worse. Multiple former officers testified that death row's money flowed straight into unofficial security deals with these cops. They'd guard studios, escort artists, and even carry out street tasks, blurring the line between police and gangster. It was a dangerous cocktail. One part law, one part outlaw. And when Pac died, that whole network started collapsing, because suddenly the world's eyes were on them. Now, no story about Tupac's death is complete without mentioning Suge Knight, the 6'4" CEO of Death Row, feared across LA, respected in every hood. People love to call him the villain of hip-hop, but in this story, he's something else. The survivor. He was sitting right next to Tupac when those bullets hit. He was grazed by shrapnel, bleeding, and still managed to drive the car until police pulled him over. Suge later said in multiple interviews that he never believed Pac was dead, claiming, "My little homie's still alive, ain't no way he gone." Whether that was denial or faith, nobody knows. But even after being sent to prison on unrelated charges, he never once pointed fingers. Not at Keffy, not at Diddy, not even at the Crips. Still, he remained a ghost in the investigation. The man everyone suspects, but no one can convict. Few names get thrown around in hip-hop conspiracies more than Sean Diddy Combs in Keffy D's original tape. Confession, he claimed Diddy once offered him $1 million to take out Tupac and Suge, an allegation Diddy has denied repeatedly for over a decade. No evidence has ever backed that claim. None. Still, when Vegas detectives re-examined the files in 2023, they did acknowledge that Diddy's name appeared in Keffy's interviews, though never as a confirmed participant. And here's where the line blurs again, because Kading's team also looked at the notorious Big Murder 6 months later and found similar whispers, similar setups, similar industry fingerprints. It was like two sides of the same chessboard, and the kings were falling one after another. But to this day, Diddy has never been charged or named as a suspect in any official police record. What remains are words, from Keffy, from the streets, from the press, none of which meet the burden of proof. Fast forward to today, the case is technically still open. Keffy D awaits trial in Clark County Detention Center. Prosecutors continue building their case around his statements, the corroborating ballistics, and the MGM footage. But as of fall 2025, no one else has been charged. Not Suge, not Reggie Wright Jr., not any other death row affiliate. The LVMPD now treats the case as partially resolved, meaning they have identified the shooter, but still lack cooperation from key witnesses. It's a tragic irony. Everybody knows who did it, but the law still can't prove it. Despite all that, the rumors, the corruption, the fake stories, stories, Tupac's legacy only grew louder. He became a symbol bigger than the investigation itself. Every time a false rumor trends, it reminds us how deeply people still want him back. In the years after his death, Afeni Shakur established the Tupac Amaru Shakur Foundation, focused on youth empowerment and artistic education. She once said, "They took his body, but they couldn't take his message." That quote still sits on murals from Atlanta to LA, sprayed in red and gold, living proof that art outlives truth. And Pac's posthumous albums, the Don Illuminati, Until the End of Time, Better Days, turned him into a prophet who somehow kept releasing music from beyond. Every bar felt like a timestamp from his soul, like he knew this was coming. When you peel back the myths, you see a pattern, one that never really changed. A young black man killed, an underfunded investigation, and a public too distracted by spectacle to demand justice. From Nipsey to Pop Smoke to Takeoff, the same energy repeats. And maybe that's why people keep reviving Tupac's story, because his case is a mirror reflecting what still happens in America's music industry and justice system. They say legends never die, and if that's true, then Tupac Amaru Shakur is the closest thing hip-hop ever had to a saint. Not because he was perfect, but because he was human. He fell, he rose, he dreamed big, and he left too soon. And even now, 29 years later, the world's still arguing about how he left, who did it, and what his last moments really looked like. You can't talk about Tupac's death without talking about what it taught the culture. Back then, rap beef was about territory and pride. Now, in 2025, it's about views and algorithms. But the heart of it, the message of survival, unity, and rebellion, still echoes. Every artist who speaks truth to power, who uses rap to tell their story from the trenches to the top, that's Pac's spirit moving through them. J. Cole said it best in a 2020 interview. Tupac was the blueprint. He made pain sound poetic. Every few years, Tupac comes back online. There's always a new blurry photo, a new theory, a new track on SoundCloud claiming its unreleased Pac vocals. In 2023, a viral clip showed a man in Cuba who looked just like him. Same bald head, same nose ring, walking down the street with a red bandana. Within hours, it had 2 million views, but within days, it was debunked. The man was a Cuban activist named Luis Ortega. Yet even after the truth came out, people kept reposting it, because the idea of Pac alive was more comforting than Pac gone. It's the same cycle every legend faces. Elvis, Michael Jackson, even Nipsey Hussle. Death becomes content, legacy becomes algorithm, and somewhere between truth and myth, humanity gets lost. Tupac's influence didn't just survive, it multiplied. In classrooms, his poetry gets studied beside Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes. In documentaries, his lyrics are dissected like scripture. And on walls from Oakland to Johannesburg, his face stares back like a prophet who never needed sainthood. In 2024, the Library of Congress added Dear Mama to the National Recording Registry, solidifying it as a cultural artifact of American history. That's bigger than Grammys, bigger than awards. That's immortality through message. And maybe that's why these fake last-moment stories sting so much, because they distract from the legacy he actually built. Tupac didn't die for mystery, he died for meaning. Let's not sugarcoat it. The system that failed Tupac, the streets, the cops, the industry, still exists. In 2025 alone, at least 15 rappers under 30 lost their lives to gun violence in the US. And every time it happens, fans say the same thing. This is what Pac warned us about. He wasn't a prophet, he was a mirror. He saw where the path was headed and tried to scream it into songs like Until the End of Time. But America doesn't listen to poets until they're gone. Still, out of that pain came a new generation of voices carrying his message. J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Joey Bada, Dollar Dollar, YG, even drill artists who lace politics into the beats. Every one of them, knowingly or not, keeps Tupac's pulse alive in the mic. Go to LA today. Murals in Crenshaw, Leimert Park, Compton, they all tell the same story. Tupac isn't gone. He's transformed. People still pour out liquor for him, still play Life Goes On at cookouts, still quote him in protest. He became a symbol, not of death, but of endurance. As one OG said outside a mural in South Central, Pac ain't a rapper, he a language. And that's real. Because every time a kid picks up a pen to write about struggle, or a poet spits about pain, or a rapper turns his trauma into art, that's Tupac reincarnated. By the end of 2025, most fans finally understood that the nurse revelation wasn't about information, it was about emotion. People wanted a soft ending to a hard story. They wanted closure that reality refused to give. But the irony, the truth was always more powerful than the lie. There was no nurse fainting, no angelic whispers, no last-minute confessions. There was blood, surgery, machines, and a mother's hand letting go. That's it, and that's enough. Because even in that silence, Tupac's voice never stopped echoing. When you strip away the rumors, the clicks, the clout, what remains is a young man who used his art to challenge the system and change lives. That's what's sacred about Tupac. Not the way he died, but the way he lived. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other awesome videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.